We're back and we're moving into our first conversation for today. We're joined by CEO of the Kolbe Foundation, Virgillio Murillo. Good morning.
Good morning.
Now, of course, this is an opportunity to talk about what's happening at the Kolbe Foundation, at the prison, and to look back at how you monitor your own statistics and seeing what type of progress and challenges you're facing there, right?
Okay.
So let's just start off with a little bit of history. The Kolbe Foundation is an NGO or a nonprofit that manages the prison itself. This has been since the early 2000s, right?
Absolutely.
Explain for viewers just the differentiation between having this type of management for the prison.
Okay. Like you said earlier, it is a non-profit organization. It was a foundation formed by Rotarians, and Rotarians or Rotary, by and large, are into a lot of charity, and they don't want to make a profit on anything. It is just the willingness of their hearts to try and assist in whatever way with the community and with giving people back some opportunity at life, whether it's through medical or even in the case of the prison. The foundation was formed way back in 2001, thereabout it started forming, and it got its first contract to manage the Belize Central Prison on the 1st of August 2002. The main person behind that is Mr. John Woods. He was our chairman, and then he became chairman emeritus after he retired. He's now deceased, God rest his soul in peace. But that he was the brainchild of Kolbe Foundation, and he's a humanitarian for all who knows him. And really and truly, his thing is all about trying to help people to get their lives back together in whatever shape or form. He certainly didn't like what he saw when he was building the road in front of the prison, that is the junction from Hattieville to the Boom Junction, because he had gotten the contract to do so. And I guess his curiosity got the better part of him, and he began checking in at the prison, and he saw a lot of human lives being wasted. And he pretty much made an offer to assist the government in trying to manage the facility, certainly in a more humane way. And certainly he wanted to assist people in getting back with their families and those kinds of things.
Now, I think oftentimes when we think of the prison system, from the outside perspective, it's about keeping people safe from others who have engaged in some kind of criminal activity. But from your perspective at the Kolbe Foundation, your mission is different.
It is the same. Nothing really has changed. I think the biggest difference with managing the prison by Kolbe is certainly that we approach it from a human rights approach. That is respecting the rights of people regardless of what they have done, as well as professionalism. So that is really the difference. Prisons, by and large, is very punitive, and it is something that society definitely supports. Society, to my mind, is into this an eye for an eye thing, and really that does not work. Ideally, the United Nations requires of all prisons that the first purpose of it is to secure society, or to make society safe, like you said earlier, from people who have violated human rights on the outside. And secondly, it is really to rehabilitate the offender.
Yeah. And that's the mission I was referencing in terms of what the intent is once someone is put at Kolbe Foundation. Let's talk about your numbers. What's the population like right now?
Well, as we speak, we're hovering at 1,125 prisoners, unlike 4.5 years ago where we had 1,600. So the numbers have been falling drastically.
Now, that's only one perspective, I mean, in terms of your total numbers. But when you differentiate, how many of those persons are on remand and how many of those persons are in prison?
Okay, with remanded prisoners, you're looking at over 400 right now.
Almost half?
Yeah, it's about 400.
40%?
Yes, it's about 430 thereabout, averaging. 430. So, and then the 700 thereabout would be convicted inmates.
Is this a concern for you, the number of men who are there on remand? And on average, how long are they normally there?
Well, to be truthful, I don't know if I should say it is a concern for me, really. I think it ought to be more of a concern for the judiciary, maybe. More than half of those people, I will tell you, though, are definitely there for murder. They are awaiting trial for murder. The next huge number would be there for crimes of dishonesty, things like robbery, burglary, and theft. What I will tell you is that, and I guess you are very much aware, these crimes such as burglary, theft, and robbery has shot up through the roof last year when compared to previous years. And then I noticed that there seems to be a similar trend for this year. So, because I was just looking at the number, and really, aside from illegal entry, because illegal entry is still topping the scale currently, and the next in line is certainly crimes of dishonesty.
The average time that someone is on remand at the prison?
Well, it all depends. If you're there for a crime such as crimes of dishonesty or illegal entry, illegal entry I would average it at about a month. Crimes of dishonesty I would average it to probably 2 months, thereabout. It all depends on when the person secures bail.
And there are persons who are there for several years before they're able to go before the court.
Well, those would be the cases like murder and maybe attempt murder. And those most serious crimes.
Now, I ask this question because clearly a person on remand is technically not serving a prison sentence until they've been convicted by the court system and then sentenced to the actual prison itself. So you have to keep them separated and differentiated from the other population.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But one thing I will tell you, in all fairness to the judiciary, we have certainly reduced that number, because if the judiciary weren't doing their part in trying to address the backlog, I will tell you that number would have been almost 1,000 today. But I noticed over the last 2 years, for argument's sake, and it continues to happen, that they've been bringing up all those backlogs and coming up and bringing it up current. What I also noticed recently is that the Chief Justice has implemented a self-bail type thing, where a prisoner who cannot afford an attorney to seek bail can do it on his own. He drafted up a form, and the prisoner is to fill that out with all the requisite information and come up with the collateral in terms of surety and those kinds of things, and they can apply for their own bail. So without having to find $1,500 or $2,000 to pay to an attorney to apply for bail.
So you said an average population of about 400.
A little over 400 for right now.
Yeah. And the average stay time is about 1 month to several years.
Well, it all depends on the offense. Like I said, with illegal entry, you're looking at roughly a month average, because they get to pay their fine and they get to go out. With respect to crimes of dishonesty, I would want to put that at probably 2 months, because it all depends on how fast the person can post bail.
Now, I think that when we look at the prison and the population that is there, once someone is sentenced, I think we don't give extra thought as to what's happening at the Kolbe Foundation and what the typical day is for a person who is incarcerated. Tell me what it's like to be a prisoner at Kolbe. What is a daily schedule?
All right. With respect to a convicted prisoner, pretty much they do what you call a sort of a plan for them. And it is sort of a rehabilitation plan, if you want to call it that, so that the duration of his or her sentence is properly utilized, so that when they return to society, they can lead what you call a law-abiding life, as well as a self-supportive life. We have a range of programs at the prison. We have literacy, numeracy. Those are computer assisted. We do have the school that gives you an opportunity to obtain your primary school education. And I guess you remember that last year we graduated 13 out of 15 people who had sat the exam and passed.
The PSE.
The PSE, absolutely. And then we also have drug treatment program, drug and alcohol treatment program, I should say. So when a prisoner comes to prison, especially when he or she is convicted, one of the first things you do really is do what you call an assessment. You will assess those people for two things. One is the risks that they pose, and risks in terms of escape, risk in terms of violence to themselves, violence to others, or maybe even their need for their own protection from society or from the other prisoners who because maybe in some cases their cases are very sensitive, and maybe it affected the public so vastly that they would want to see the person dead as opposed to continue living, those kinds of things. I think I use the word sensitive, maybe sensational is the word. Yeah, and then you also assess them for their needs. And their needs is things like their drug addiction, alcohol addiction, things like diabetes, hypertension, HIV, AIDS, etc. So because at the end of the day, what you need to do, or the prison needs to do, is to try and tailor a program to suit each and every prisoner based on their individual needs.
And that includes mental health. We were discussing that before.
That includes mental health. So on admission really, there's a proper screening done by the medic department, and that is to really assess the prisoner not only for his medical condition, but also for his mental state, physical state, those kinds of things.
So let's look at what 2018 turned out to look like. And you have a number of statistics from contraband to escapes. Tell me about how you view how 2018 was for the prison.
Well, 2018, aside from the, I think, 2 escapes that we had, was very, very successful. No doubt about it. We have seen the prison population falling successively for the last 5 years, almost. And 2018, even though it was less than the previous 2 years, we nonetheless saw we saw the population reduced roughly by an average of about 70-something inmates. Now I can only account for who comes to prison. So if people are not being sent to prison, then I can't do that.
I was going to say, because you keep on speaking of a reduction of prisoners, but I'm not sure how that counts as a success for the institution. Well, because we've not seen a reduction in crime.
Absolutely. And like I tell you, if you don't come to prison, there's nothing I can do for you. I will tell you, the way I gauge it is that prisoners leave and they're not coming back. So you call that recidivism.
Yes.
And remember, you can measure recidivism with
that's a very important indicator.
With the police's data, you can do it with the prison. I can only give account for the prison. So if you come to the prison, if you have a stint with the prison, our job really is to try and see how we could send you back out properly reformed. And we're going to try just about everything. As a matter of fact, we have, since 2017, we started to offer programs to the remanded prisoners. Prior to 2017, remanded prisoners were just there sitting in their cells waiting. And then remanded prisoners have a tendency to feel as though they're going to win their cases. So there's not that impetus on them to want to take any programs in at all. Well, with some of the convictions that has been taking place lately, because I think some of them got caught off guard, thought they would have gone home and won their cases. With that change, a lot of them now are trying to get engaged in the remanded programs that we offer. But the remanded program is a little bit different from the convicted in the sense that it does address a lot of the issues surrounding gangs and drugs. The ARC program, that really addresses your criminal and addictive thinking, so to speak.
The rehabilitation center.
That's the ARC, the rehab center, right.
Now, I want to go back to recidivism because that is such an important indicator in terms of the success of the prison. And you know, for people who aren't familiar with the word, it simply means once someone has left the prison, whether or not they come back, the number of persons who come back.
Essentially.
Because it means that for some reason, whatever rehabilitation process they went through wasn't effective on the outside, and they ended up back in the criminal system. So let's talk about that rate. How are we doing at the Kolbe?
Well, I put some numbers together the other day, and really and truly, it's hovering around 10%. And And I have no qualms with that. And one of the ways I measure it is really to measure it against who is discharged from the prison. Because what I can tell you with certainty is that quite a lot of people come to prison every year. And I think the public doesn't know, but it's almost 2,000 people coming to the prison every year. And these are brand new entrants. And when you measure that against who is being discharged, either on parole, on time expired, on remission, deportation, whatever the case may be, you will see an overall 10%. You hardly see repeat offenders coming back to the prison. And obviously the programs are working, and then one of the other strategies I think is working is the fact that we're not turning the prison into a holiday camp for nobody. It's certainly not a hellhole, but it's worse not going to be a holiday camp, no doubt about it. And I think by and large, the message is being sent and gotten on the outside.
Now, when you say, and you know, I think you, keeping in mind the viewers are paying attention, putting this into context with what they see in the news. When you say there are not many repeat offenders, it seems to be a very different picture from what we hear in the police press briefs or what's coming out of the courts. How do you explain that?
Well, like I tell you, I can only give account of who they send to me.
No, I'm asking, do you think it's perhaps because it's the same people going on remand? They're getting off and then they're going back in for remand?
Really and truly, there's no telling. Like I tell you,
Does your recidivism rate include persons who've gone to the court, who've gone to the prison on remand?
Yes, definitely. But I don't see much of those people coming back. That's what I'm saying. Because let's put it this way. Today, the prison there's 218 parolees out on parole today. And quite a number of those, I mean, I will put it at probably 95% of those have been out on parole for years. I know of a couple of parolees who have been out on parole for almost 11 years and counting. And this is why I can say boastfully that the recidivism rate is low. And we really know the guys. I mean, we've seen a couple of remanded prisoners who were, for argument's sake, remanded for murder prior, and then they are now back in prison on another murder charge. Like I tell you, at the end of the day, if you come to the prison, we will try our very best with you to offer you the programs that you need to change your mindset and your thinking, because it all boils down to your thinking.
How do you battle, or how do you prepare for someone who has been in the system for facing life on the outside of the prison? How do you prepare them?
Well, like I tell you, we offer them addiction programs, rehab programs, and that would address either their drug addiction, alcohol addiction, or whatever addiction they may have. Because there's a range of addictions that people suffers. Even gambling, you know, that is a form of addiction. And then we try to offer what I did the other day. I put some numbers together on my population, and I was shocked to see that almost 80% of the population had just up to a second farm education. Now you will realize that when it comes to second farm, you really haven't decided your career path yet. So you're still basically, to my mind,
80%.
Almost 80%.
Wow.
Yep. So there's hardly anybody there with a complete secondary education or even tertiary. So I think that contributes to a lot of the foolishness that happens in society. Because remember, their thinking is not as advanced as ours, who have the experience, and if not the experience, the education.
Well, I think that's sound data to confirm what I think we've always heard, which is if a child doesn't complete school, their options as to what happens in their future become limited. But when I ask you about preparing them for the outside, it's not about the skills training, which I know you do offer,
yes,
and the rehabilitation and even the educational opportunities. But I think one of the challenges we hear consistently is being removed from an environment and going through whether type of change, learning something new, thinking and viewing something differently, but returning to that same environment is a serious challenge.
Yeah.
And I'm sure when you talk with inmates, you hear of this.
Well, coping skills, and it's trying to change their mindset. Because I'll tell you what, I've had some serious sit-downs with these inmates.
Yeah.
I have what I call motivational sessions with them, and I try to show them a different perspective on life. So if the rehab program that they entered didn't really register with them, at least I get to sit with them and have that little discussion. I share a lot of pamphlets with these little boys, these guys rather, and women alike, because we have women prisoners too.
Yes.
One of these positive quotes that I keep sharing with them is that I am not a product of my circumstances, I am a product of my decisions, things like those. And there was another powerful one that I recently came across that says, you will never be free until you free yourself from the prisons of your own false thoughts. Those kinds of things. And these people can relate, believe you me. They're smart enough to know. So it's really coping skills.
Yeah, but there's also the reality on the ground. And we've heard from people who've come out to prison, just the challenges and even being able to secure employment.
I know.
And that's why I'm asking you, what do you hear from the inmates when they do return as to some of the challenges they face, at, the motivation, the skills training, all of these things? Why did they fail?
Well, like I tell you, I am basing it on my numbers, and I'm basing it on who comes back. I am telling you, for the most part, they're weathering the storm, if you want to put it that way. Some of them have been successful in gaining employment, some have not. Like I tell you, there are a few of them that have come back, either for robbery or murder, those kinds of things. One of the things that is concerning me recently is that I noticed when it comes to the youths, we've seen a little spike, or I should say a huge spike with respect to the youths. When we started off the year, it was like we had 20 youths. Today we have an average of 35. And it is alarming, because a lot of the crimes they're coming for is primarily burglary, robbery, and murder, of course.
What's the age definition you're using for youth?
That's under 18.
Under 18.
And then what we noticed recently is that there seemed to have been some sort of influence from previous, or I should say, inmates who had been in prison previously. And I'm talking about youngsters, young inmates, where they have actually gotten other newcomers to go on their rampage with them. So now they are implicated as well. And these are brand new faces that we're seeing. So that is kind of alarming. I don't know what caused them to go that path with a guy who has been in prison, and they know that they've been in prison, and get influenced by those guys. It's just it's very questioning.
And you said they're new faces.
Very new faces. For the first time, we've seen them in our prison. Yeah, I mean, in a couple of the instances, we saw where one repeat offender, if you want to call him that, amongst the youths, brought in like 2 persons with his crime spree.
And in engagement with these people, what do you learn?
Well, I have my director. They are pretty much new people, and we need to get them to develop that confidence to talk to us openly, because it doesn't happen right away. A lot of them are afraid that if they say something, it might implicate them, or maybe we might work with the police in terms of letting the police know how everything happens. So you need to develop that confidence in them. Yeah. And then eventually maybe they talk about their situation and what led them to do those kinds of things. But we know essentially what is primarily the driving force behind crime. It's poverty.
And along with that, one of the greater social issues we see is the gang activity that takes place. What was in Belize City, but spread to other municipalities as well. How do you manage that? The different turf wars, and when these gang members end up in the system itself, how do you manage that? Is that an issue for you?
It's not an issue really. I think we've set a tone at the prison where the gangs realize that no turfing can take place at the prison. So one of the things is to encourage them to live together, like Martin Luther King Jr. says. We need to live together as brothers, otherwise we're going to perish together as fools. And I think that works out so very well for them, because let's look at the state of emergency. I mean, the prisoners ended up playing basketball for 3 hours every day, and not a soul assaulted any other. So I think it works out very well. It's just a matter of teaching them how to cope, how to live together, and how to be brotherly. I don't know what, I can't, like I said, we know more or less what's driving these gang warfares. Besides the fear of each other and the lack of trust in each other, it certainly has to do with the drugs, the control of the drugs and these kinds of things. But in the prison, it's not like that. If you look at the statistics I shared, even our incidents in terms of violent incidents has fallen drastically.
Let's look at the classification of the incidents that you have, because usually what is reported to us is more the escapes, which you said only 2 took place last year, but there's also the attempted escapes that took place, and a number of other incidents. What do you struggle? What's the biggest challenge in terms of managing the population and minimizing incidents?
Well, like I said earlier, we definitely take on this human rights approach to prison management. As long as people are treated with respect, as long as you teach your staff to be professionals, as long as you teach your staff how to try and mentor these people, then it works. It's a strategy that has worked over the years, no doubt about it. People know when you're abusing them. People know when you're torturing them. People know when you don't mean any good, but you just mean to harm them. You're just out to harm them. So the way we control that really is to just try and be a positive role model to them. We encourage our staff to try and influence the prisoners by their very own example.
Yeah. So this is the chart that you had mentioned in terms of the prison incidents for 2018. And so we see, what is this?
That's offending good order and discipline. Prison is all about order and discipline. And you might have a few prisoners creating mischief. They would do mischievous acts. Even though it might seem small, you need to at least discipline them for it. So it's sort of a misdemeanor if you were to compare it with a criminal offense on the outside. It's a misdemeanor, like probably it would be something like any mischievous act, like telling a policeman your wrong name, those kinds of things.
And you have threats, assault, damage to property.
The assaults prisoner on prisoner, the assaults eye on eye means assault inmate on inmate, right? A lot of these things are stem from horse playing. They ramp a lot like children. You wouldn't believe it. And then disrespectful behavior again. Remember, prison is, I remember some years ago somebody said prison is a pressure cooker. So I think sometimes these boys are on the edge, so they would snap. But you still cannot overlook it, otherwise they're going to leave the prison worse off than they came. So you have to sanction them in one way or the other.
And how do you deal, what's the course of discipline?
Well, the course of discipline you could be locked up, or your privilege could be taken away, because a lot of things in prison is privileges, visits, letters, special diet, special food, I should say. Your family bringing in food for you from the outside. All of those things are privileges. Phone calls, they're privileges. So you suspend those. You could lock them up for a number of days, anywhere from 3 days to probably a month. Those kinds of things. So, and it works. It works.
Now, I want to discuss another issue, which I think has been a kind of a quiet issue that's taken place at the Kolbe Foundation. You spoke of testing people for HIV. There has been a growing concern from people who do education for HIV and promote healthy sexual practices that the prison doesn't allow condom use.
Well,
or allow for condoms, period, in the institution. I want us to have a conversation about this.
Right. Certainly, it doesn't. And I will tell you, with my almost 17 years being in the prison, believe you me, I know these inmates. I know what they cater to. And I know that 95 to 98% of them are not supportive of that kind of thing. And if that were to be allowed, same-sex activities, I will tell you, I think we better get ready for mayhem, because we're going to have it. There's not much people in the prison that I believe are of that preference, and I'm certain that we're going to have problem. Conjugal visits is not in the laws, so they don't cater for that. And to my mind, if that is the way they want to go, then I think that would be much more preferred by the population, in my mind. And that is based on my knowledge of them and what they would prefer. And and of course that could be regulated too, so that it happens the way it ought to happen as per other countries.
Have you made any move in terms of advocating for whether it's conjugal visits or just being able to have a more effective practice when it comes to the human rights of the inmates?
Well, Kolbe Foundation per se has not, and to my mind, I am not too sure that that ought to be something that Kolbe Foundation would want to champion. I would more want to leave that for some, I guess, human rights group. So I really don't think, in principle, I really don't think I would want to look at it as a conflict of interest if we were to push it. Yeah, so people can have their thoughts on it and say, hey, Kolbe up to some mischief, you know, and I don't think we want to go that path, personally.
Now, talk to me about the situation when it comes, because we spoke of, and there's an issue that's sticking out in my head. We've had conversations about criminal justice on the set quite a few times, and when you speak of your statistics, you clearly say this is what I know for the prison. What is the collaboration that takes place between the different entities that are involved when people come in conflict with the law, from the police, the judiciary, and even what happens when a person leaves the institution?
Okay. Well, one thing I can say is that the prison has collaboration with the various entities. For argument's sake, we do get a lot of support from the community rehab department, because, especially for the youths, and even some of the adult population, because remember initially some of these persons who are now in the adult population were once youths in the Wagner's Youth Facility. So there's that continuity, and there's that collaboration between the CRD. As a matter of fact, the CRD has assisted or is assisting the prison currently as we speak with affording youths in prison while they're behind bar to continue with their high school education. I think earlier this year or late last year, we had one person graduating and obtaining his diploma on a platform called the Kaina Online High School, where he gets to finish his diploma. There was also another little guy that I think he went to sit the PSC earlier this year. I mean, not the PSC, CXC. So he was rarely removed, given bail, so he could have not lost on that opportunity. Because the idea is not to deprive them of that education.
Well, and I think the idea is that you do, as we go back to the very first mission that we spoke of, do want to rehabilitate people to be able to integrate back into society. Do you think that halfway houses are something that are necessary in Belize?
They're very necessary.
We don't have any, do we?
We do have a couple, but they cannot accommodate much people. If I remember well, I think there's one particular halfway house that might have a capacity of 6 people.
How would that help?
Well, it helps because there are quite a lot of prisoners in prison, and they leave prison and they don't really have the support. In some cases, they don't even have the family support. But at some point, their sentences finish, and they have to come out. Inevitably, they won't remain in prison, and they have to come out. And then, like you said earlier, they go right back to the same environment. They weren't supported by their loved ones any at all in prison, and then before you know it, those would be the ones that are likely to come back. And that's why I tell you, you have quite a number of them. The others, how successfully how they are managing on the outside, like I said earlier, I think they are weathering the storm, maybe because of the timeout that they were on, being in prison, because nobody wants to be in prison. I'm telling you, nobody wants to be in prison, but sometimes they just have to find another way to either climb over the wall or go underneath or around it. But there's something dynamic that is working as far as I'm concerned, because we do have some prisoners who are in prison and they were never visited by their loved ones. Now those are the ones that are susceptible to come back as a repeat offender.
So the support system on the outside is one of the key indicators of success.
Yes. So, but like I tell you earlier, I will stick to my numbers. We are seeing who are coming out. Like I tell you, almost 2,000 people is coming to prison. Almost 1,000 is coming out on discharge, either on remission, parole, or what have you, or sentences completed. And I don't see them coming back. a couple of instances you see where a guy comes back for robbery, which was the crime that he was initially in prison for the last time. What triggered it? Like I said earlier, it's certainly the poverty has a lot to do with it, and I don't want anybody to think that I'm encouraging people to rob. No, 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 no. But it has an effect. It has an effect.
Virgilio, I think very often we see the prison as a solution to the problems that we have within society. You've been at the helm at the Kolbe Foundation for a couple of years now. Mm-hmm. And clearly, I'm sure you're able to identify whether it's gaps in perception or gaps in services that are available. When you look at the landscape as to what we need to do to have less, it's ultimately less crimes. There'll always be bad people, and there will always be people who do bad things. Mm-hmm. But what we want is less of the young faces that you're talking about. We want people to come out and be able to integrate once again. From your perspective, where you sit, what do you think needs to happen, if in not the immediate, in the medium-term future, to put us off in a better situation?
Well, I don't want to sound too Nelson Mandela, but education is the key. Interestingly, I was looking at, I had some visitors visit me, and there was this particular lady from Barbados. And when I compared my statistics with Barbados's statistics, I saw where the prevalence of crime in Belize is between the ages of 18 and 25. Mm-hmm. And when I talk about crime, I mean every crime, mm-hmm. Even with illegal entry. And when I compared it to Barbados, the prevalence of their criminals or a prevalent age of their criminals were definitely 31 to 35. So I questioned the lady and I said, any idea what makes a difference? And then she said one thing. She said, education is free right up to high school. And to me, people need to be given a sound foundation at least, mm-hmm. to understand, because we all know what is right and what is wrong. Mm-hmm. But maybe some of these youngsters who are dropping out of school, because like I said earlier, almost 80% is less than second farm in terms of their educational skills. Yeah. And I don't even think you have obtained a proper or sound education as of that point. Because we all know that it is in third farm that you really decide your career path, mm-hmm. thereabout. So I think that makes all the difference. I didn't ask her why would people be committing crime at age 31 to 35, because what I notice in our prison too is that it would appear, based on the statistics over the years, that once a person hits age 35, it seems like their criminal behavior start tapering down. I would attribute that to probably their level of maturity at that time. They realize, hey man, this foolishness that I've been doing all these years, I need to stop it now. Mm-hmm. Fed up of it, I'm tired of coming back to prison as a revolving door type thing. Mm-hmm. So they start getting mature, I believe, and experienced, because I believe what catches a lot of our youngsters too is they're experimenting too, you know. They're experimenting, they want to see what it feels like to hold a gun and shoot a gun and stick up somebody and those kinds of things. I think that's a part of it. Naivety.
Naivety, yeah. Well, and clearly, as you said, they're also being recruited, mm-hmm. Especially the younger ones. Mm-hmm. And just in terms of, you identified where perhaps systemically we need to look at education as being a part of a way of preventing mm-hmm. Young people coming in conflict with the law. But let's talk perception. What do we need to change in terms of our mentality? When you talk about people coming out of a system and not being able to access jobs or having challenges, what do we as a wider community perhaps need to shift in our own thinking?
Well, I think by and large society needs to understand that when a prisoner goes to prison, whether remanded or convicted, they should look at that as the punishment already. And I think they should understand that everybody makes mistakes and that everybody deserves a second chance. I keep saying that we all make mistakes because we're humans and we're not perfect. And our situation is only different from the prisoner's situation in the sense that we have not been caught yet. We have not really, went to prison. But it's not to say that maybe we're not doing things that are unethical and that might very well be illegal. We just haven't been caught yet. And so people make mistakes, people mess up, and they need to get that second chance and look at the prison sentence, whether it's a year or 15 years or a life sentence or whatever the case may be, as the punishment, and try to satisfy yourself with that. And even when a person gets an opportunity at parole, you know, as the victim, I understand your feeling. You might be very sensational, but remember that person is still a prisoner. The only thing is that he's not serving the sentence in the prison, behind bars. He is rarely on the outside being supervised and is rarely on a leash, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for coming in and having this conversation with us.
Thank you.
All right. We're going to go ahead and take a break. When we come back, we'll be talking about the upcoming National Youth Awards and how you can nominate a young person from your community. So please stay tuned.